I'm Craig Vile. I'm the director of the ValPal network, and today I'm talking to Liza Daniels. Liza Daniels has owned her own estate agency for over 23 years, so is perfectly positioned to be able to answer a question about the best practices for dealing with and nurturing inbound leads. So, Lisa, thank you very much, and welcome to this little conversation. And we're going to be tapping into your brain and into your knowledge about on this topic.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I don't actually own my own estate agency now. I did for over 20 plus years, but which is why I've sort of now got time to devote myself to what I'm doing now, which is to make calls for
Yes,
agents.
and we should just mention that actually that Lisa is heads up our the managed calling service for ValPal, which we have for a very limited clients. And in fact, it's very difficult to scale it because I haven't found anyone that could do it anywhere near as good as Lisa. So a bit of a challenge for us there, but that just shows you that Lisa, she knows her stuff and she's the best at doing this. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, Lisa. First one is it is really comes across quite a lot. Just how important is it um, that you get to these leads quickly?
Very important. It's vital, really, because I think that everyone knows that speed to lead is really important. And if you, as the agent, don't get to the lead, then your competitor next door will do. So as quickly as you can do it, sort of get onto it. Because yeah, the quicker you get onto it, the hotter that lead will
Hmm.
be. The longer the time goes by, the lead will soon call off, or someone else would have got to them first.
Yeah, and I always try and put myself in the position of of the consumer, right? If I make an inquiry about something, I'm in that moment I'm interested. But 5 minutes later, I'm doing something else, right? So if you don't get to the lead when I'm still thinking about it, you're giving yourself another challenge because your first challenge is to get me back into that train of thought. And I might be busy, I might be back at work, I might be looking after the kids, I might be driving, whatever it is. But so you just give yourself one more challenge, don't you? So
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as possible, don't leave it, just get straight onto it. I know that obviously you can only make one call at a time, but just as fast as you can. That's
yeah,
crucial.
and that is difficult in our world. In an estate agency world, we don't expect you to be able to pull miracles out because you're out doing viewings and valuations. But best practice is get to that lead in the shortest period of time possible, or put processes in place within your organization where people can get to leads, or automation does
Yeah,
it for them.
absolutely, absolutely. Because it's an opportunity, and all you have to do is just sort of take it. So just if you just leave it and ignore it, then obviously that's not going to be good for you, your business, for the client or the potential client. So yeah, very
Agreed.
important.
And the next question is how many times should you attempt to follow up with a call before you give up on them?
I would say a minimum of three. I mean, that's what I do. When I'm doing my job day to day, I will call each lead at least three times, maybe even twice on the first day when it appears, just so that they'll be hotter on that day. And then I will set myself a task, so that's important as well, so that it doesn't then slip through the cracks. So you don't just try once and give up. So you set yourself a task to try the next day and the day after. And even, I mean, three for me, because it's my job, just to call people to book valuations, three times minimum, but maybe four, maybe even five. And if I think they're really hot, more than that, because sometimes I get through, it might be the sixth attempt, say,
Yeah.
but once I eventually get through, they'll say, yes, come and value my property, whether it's for sales or letting. So yeah,
And
yeah.
don't think we should be disheartened when clients don't call us back, because although we would like to, if we call them or email them and don't get a response back from them, we shouldn't really be disheartened from that. What do you think about leaving voicemails and sending emails? What's your thought process on that?
Um, Sending voicemails or leaving voicemail messages, that's a no-no, I think, because um, number one, it's sort of quite time consuming to do that. And a number of times that you'd be doing it in a day, it's just not viable to sort of use that amount of time, but mainly because then you're giving away the power. You once you've left a message for the client and they hear who it's from, they will then decide or not decide to return your call. So you want to sort of retain some of that power, so to give a chance of still receiving a return call. So I would rather send an SMS, which is quicker to do, and it's more instant for the client to look at. So the
Yeah.
client, by the time they listen to a voicemail, it might not be for a few hours, but they see an SMS, they respond to it, or at least they'll see it immediately, and then you've got a very good chance of them responding.
Yeah, or a WhatsApp for that matter, but SMS or WhatsApp. And I think also there is I know I feel this anyway, that if someone leaves me a voicemail, I'm almost irritated by the fact that they've left me a voicemail rather than a message, either an SMS or a WhatsApp message. Um, Whilst we're talking about messages, the one thing that crops up every now and then is the new um, call screening services that's kind of available now, which we're often asked, how do we get around call screening? I don't think you can, is the short answer. There is no getting around, there's no shortcut. You can't be dishonest with it. If there is a call screening service, then you do have to present yourself for as who you are and why you are on the call, and then it will be down to the consumer then to decide whether or not they accept that call. But I would definitely do that rather than not do it and put the phone down at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never hang up. So when that voice kicks in that basically says, "Who are you and what do you want?" in a
Yeah.
polite way, I never just hang up. I always say, and I'm as brief as I can be, because I think that's a chance for someone might sort of pick up the call. I just say who I am, where I'm calling from, why I'm calling, because the lead has generated the inquiry. So theoretically, number one, they're not going to be surprised by the contacts, but number two, there's a chance that they will take the call as well. So
Yeah,
yeah, never just hang up.
there's a level of interest, right? There's a
Yeah,
level of intent from the
yes,
client.
yeah,
It just might be that
absolutely.
the timing's not right for them or whatever. So let's now assume that we've actually got through to the client. What would be the first thing that you actually how do you start that conversation? What's the first thing that you say?
Yeah, well, I always try to sound sort of upbeat, not rush what I'm saying, give light and shade to my voice. So, I don't sound like a monotonous robot. So hopefully they know from the outset that it's not a robot calling them. But so I'll introduce myself, say where I'm calling from, and I will say, so Mrs. Smith, you've generated a request for an online valuation from ourselves. What prompted that? So I
Yeah.
get straight to the point, but I will ask an open question. So
Hmm.
instead of them being able to say yes or no, they need to give me an answer of some sort, by asking, what prompted that. They're going to tell me why rather than just saying not interested.
And I think that's a really important point here, isn't it? It's actually getting the client to that they made their intent was using the valuation tool because there's a reason for them doing that. And what you need to extract from them is what is the reason. If you ask a question that's like, are you thinking of selling your property? It's a yes or a no, and it's more likely to be a no because they're probably busy doing something else and don't want to talk to an estate agent. Whereas it's much more, it's much softer. It doesn't put them in a corner. They don't feel like they're going to be sold to. No one
Yeah,
likes being sold to. You're
no,
just asking
absolutely
a
not.
you're just asking a question as to what sparked that interest. And they can then answer that in multiple different ways. I did it because, And it might be that I'm actually not interested and I only did it for, you know, for whatever reason. But most of the time you're going to get more of the truth out of them from asking that question than just getting straight to it and saying, you know, I
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
no,
did,
exactly. And I think because my role is to actually book in valuations on the behalf of agents, I'm very conscious of when I'm speaking to leads of sounding relaxed and not
yeah,
not pushy,
not
but
salesy.
also exactly, but definitely asking the questions that I need to ask and to qualify that lead as far as I can without it sounding like I'm working from a script or a tick box. I
Yeah,
mean, which I never do. So I'm conscious of avoiding that. So to get to the point, keep it on point, on topic, so that I'm qualifying the leads on behalf of the agent as much as I can, so that because my intention, my goal is to pass a qualified lead over to an agent and to say all you need to do is to call the lead and just confirm a valuation for Saturday morning, because I've done all the sort of heavy lifting in terms of speaking to the client, establishing the sort of property, how long they've lived there, sort of property it is, and what they're doing for next steps in case there's an opportunity there for the agent to sell them something as well, whether they want a bigger
yeah,
or
yeah,
a smaller property. Um, so, finding out all the sort of relevant information, and particularly an important one is the timescale that they have in mind. Like I sort of asked, when are you intending to come onto the market? But even that, I sort of try and soften it by saying, if you decide to sell, because it's not a done deal, and we understand that. If you decide to sell, do you know roughly when you might be looking to come on? Because that's a
yeah,
crucial piece of information for the
yeah,
agent.
yeah, absolutely.
And it's my job to make sure that I'm not going to waste the agent's time. So if the lead tells me I want to come on the market in say 3 to 6 months, then that's a hot lead. If it's anything more than 6 months, I'll pass it over to the agent, but I will say, look, it's not immediate, but in my view, it's important to nurture those relationships anyway. If it
Yeah.
might not be an immediate result, but it's all about sometimes playing the long game
Yeah,
as
agreed.
well.
So the first question is like open-ended. It's why? Why did you use the tool? What was your intent? Then you lead into things like when are you
Yeah.
when is your time? What is your time frame? What other questions would you generally ask during this process?
Yeah, well, I'd need to make sure of property type, obviously, because that's very important for the agent to know exactly what they're going to. So whether it's a house or, how many bedrooms, is it semi or mid-terrace or detached or a bungalow, all those sorts of things, and whether there's parking, because those things obviously will affect the price. If it's a flat, I will need to know obviously how many bedrooms, but which floor, length of lease, the service charges, whether there's parking. With the flat, I think there are more questions because again, those things will affect the price. A short lease will definitely have an
Leasehold,
impact
yeah.
on the price. So yeah, all those sorts of things, so that by the time I hand it over to the agent, I've sort of done that for them, and they don't need to ask the questions, and they know hopefully everything they need to know before they
And that
turn up at the property.
that's kind of on the sales side, right? But if it was a landlord inquiry, I assume that there are a different bunch of questions
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
need to, so there's a different bunch of
absolutely.
answers that you need to establish, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different approach, really. I mean, the end goal is the same, but with most landlords, I find that it's not always a question of booking in a valuation, because if there's tenants at the property, that is awkward sometimes, and they don't want to
Yeah.
upset their tenant, or all sorts of reasons why an agent can't actually go to the property. But I
And it
would still be asked.
might not just be one property either.
No,
He might
exactly,
he might have,
exactly.
a dozen properties as well, right?
Yeah, and I will always ask that question. But even when I'm booking in a sales lead, is this your only property? Most of the time people laugh and say, oh, yes, it is, but if only I had more, that sort of thing. It becomes a sort of light-hearted moment, it can do. But yeah, I'll always ask a landlord, like, is this your only one? Are they all in that area? Because when I'm telling the agent, they need to know if it's in their area. So yeah, to get a feel for what the landlord is looking for. So whether it's like, are you looking for let only, or are you looking for full management? They might say they're interested in guaranteed rent, because lots of our clients offer that as well. So all of that relevant information, also timescales. If they mention that they are already using a managing agent, I will say, do you mind me asking how much they charge you? Because that'll give me a steer, obviously, on what they're paying and how much leeway, like, our client might have to sort of be competitive, or it might make them say, well, it's not necessarily worth my while, all those sorts of things.
Interesting, because I was gonna I was gonna come on to that one, because when you're dealing with a landlord, really, there's only two things really that when anyone does anything because of two things. It's either want, need, desire, or pain, right? So the want, I guess, is I need someone to fulfill this void that I have. I don't have anyone to let my property to, um, or it's I don't like my agent
Yeah,
because
yeah,
of
that as well.
something they're doing. So either they're charging, I don't like, what they've done. Something's changed, and what you need to do within your question is to establish exactly where that is, right? So that because if you don't know, how can you've got no
Yeah,
ammunition then to be able to, you've got nothing to play with, you've nothing, no leverage, right?
yeah,
So
exactly.
you've got to ask those questions, haven't you? Otherwise, you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. If someone says, well, I'm considering changing agents, normally they'll give you a little bit of history. The agent said that they would inspect my property regularly and they haven't, or,
Mm.
you know, sort of, it's quite a common thing, been an agent might have promised certain things. The lead, for whatever reason, rightly or wrongly, feels that the agent has not delivered. So, or, maybe the tenancy is coming up for renewal, so they're looking around, because if they're going to change the tenant, perhaps they'll change the agent at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's about looking out for those opportunities and, yeah, reasons.
So that we've kind of covered a little bit of the objection handling on the landlord side. Just circling back to the sales side, if a vendor turned around to you and said, that they're not ready to sell, how would you sort of circumnavigate that objection?
Well, in order to make sure that that person's details are sort of in, not just in the agent's database, because obviously they already are, but to become more of an active scenario. And what I mean by that is, if someone says to me, well, I'm not quite ready, so I'll say, well, that's absolutely fine. Is it okay with you if we, as the agent, at least maybe email you some details about terms, conditions, services, whatever it is, either on the letting side or on the sales side, just so that they've got that on record,
Yeah,
so that, if Joe Bloggs agency down the road has not done that, but like we have,
I think
it's
it's
just,
I think it's also a fair question to ask, um, maybe in a roundabout way, but to ask them why did you use the valuation tool? What was it then? If you're not ready to sell, what was it why did you use the online valuation tool? And it might
yeah,
just be to get an idea of whether it's right or not. So the question then might be, well, what would need to change to make you be in a position? Is it that the property's not ready, the timing's not right, or the price isn't right, the market's not right? What is it in your life that needs to change in order for that to become a reality for you? But again, if you
yeah.
don't ask the question, you don't know the answer. You'll never know
Yeah,
the
no,
answer.
exactly. I mean, I think people are sort of pretty good. Like, once I'm having a conversation, they're good at actually volunteering information. They might
Mm.
say, I want to decorate, or, even though, I would say, well, we can come and do a valuation anyway. Like, people who are doing work to the property, 9 times out of 10, they say, no, I'd rather do the work. But then, I would set myself a task, say, if they said, call me in 2 months. that's what I would do. I'd set myself a task, or perhaps a little bit earlier than that, because if another agent is calling them in 8 weeks, I want to call them in 6 or 7 weeks, just to make sure, I'm ahead of the game. But yeah, like once the conversation flows, people volunteer quite a lot of information anyway, I find.
Interesting. So one thing that we all know that is typical of many agents is that they will generally, even the good agents, that they may have it not scripted, but it's in their head, so that they're off pat when they make a call, and they're very focused on getting that valuation booked in, and that's they pick the phone up. The intent is get them booked in, but if they don't, a seasoned veteran like yourself you're gonna shouldn't really call
Old
you a
bird,
veteran,
yeah.
sorry.
Call me
you're
old, that's all right.
what you're going to look for at all points is where do those
Absolutely.
opportunities lie? How can I turn one lead into multiple opportunities, right? Because it's not just about the valuation. Yes, the valuation is probably the most important thing, but getting information from the client, and not just to record it, but then to stretch that, because it might turn into a mortgage inquiry or something else. It's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. Yeah. I mean, because it's like the more questions you ask, the more you'll get back. So, like particularly like if you're an agent and say you're booking in a valuation, but always like if you offer financial services, mortgages, then that's got to be a question every single time. What have you done about your mortgage? Again, it's an open question,
Yeah.
because they have to tell you. You haven't, if you said, have you sorted out your mortgage, they'll just say yes, and that's the
Yeah.
end of it. But what have you done about your mortgage, and get that conversation going and
We
say,
could
well,
Yeah, you could say sort of, are you a cash buyer or do you need a mortgage? And then
yeah, yeah,
if they're not a cash buyer, they're going to say, I need a mortgage.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
then you could expand upon it from, have you got that mortgage arranged already? Would you be
Yeah,
interested in talking to our
absolutely. I
guys?
mean, that's all part of qualifying. Yeah, if it's a buyer or even a vendor, if they're going to be buying another property. But even if my agency days, if someone said I'm a cash buyer, then automatically you want to know, is that cash from a sale? Is that cash from something you're selling? Because in some people's head that makes them a cash buyer, and that's not strictly the case. Or is it cash in the bank? Or what have you done about a mortgage? So you get all that
Yeah.
information.
And it,
But equally, about solicitors or
yeah,
conveyancers, what have you done about that as well? It's all about opportunities and making the most of them.
absolutely. Well, it's interesting when you look at the corporate numbers, right? That I think it's between 30 and 40% of their revenues derived from financial services.
Yeah.
So, if you're not asking those questions and you want to increase your revenue by 30%, then ask the questions.
Yeah.
Start asking the
Yeah,
questions, because
exactly.
you can then start
It's
generating the extra
yeah,
revenue. But it
simple
doesn't just
really.
stop there either, does it? Because you got the mortgage conveyancing surveys, but then you've also got things like broadband, utility switching, removal services. There's many different bolt-ons that you can add on, and all of those things add to your revenue at the end of the day. So it is quite important. Um, one thing that a lot of clients struggle with is, or agents struggle with, is identifying, or when a time waster has been identified. And there might be a reason, we all know when we're talking to someone that we think is probably a time waster. And 9 times out of 10, you're right when you identify that person. How do you deal with that? How do you process that? And what would you say to somebody that you think is a time waster?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily comment on whether they were a time waster or not, but I think you get a feel for it straight away. Because certainly when I'm speaking to people and they say, "Oh, call me back after 2 o'clock," which I always do, like make a note and call them back just after two, exactly as they've asked. But then if they don't answer, then you know that you've been fobbed off. And some people don't like to say, for whatever reason, I'm not interested, or they just say, oh, call me back. So, okay, I'll call them back once, and then I will try still another couple of times. And if they
Yeah.
don't answer, then they're a time
But it
waster.
is kind of like it's kind of an interesting point, isn't it? That you should have automation in place to do some of the heavy lifting for this for sure. But knowing when a time waster is a time waster and when they're not is a bit of a fine art, especially when you start looking at the numbers, right? And taking ValPal leads across the board, right? 37% of ValPal leads generated from all sources will end up having a valuation, and 18% across the board will come to market, will put their property on with an agent, with some agent, right? When we look at it from the different sources, so where that lead originated from, a really interesting point here is that your website, the numbers are sky high, right? So 50% across the board of all of our networks, 50% of the leads generated from via ValPal on the agent's website will come to market, right? That's not will go to a valuation. I'm talking about will actually physically put their property on the market, right? So your inbound ValPal leads from a website, you should be handling
Yeah,
them as though
all
they
over
are
them.
gold,
Yes,
right?
they are
Um,
gold.
yeah, they are actually physically they are gold. When you're doing other, Facebook ads, Google ads, paid ads, direct marketing, those lead volumes are lower, and they're lower primarily because you are putting something in front of them. With someone that's visiting your website, they've decided to come and
Yeah,
visit your website, so it's almost like someone walking through the front door, right?
yeah,
There's not a lot of difference in the conversion rate, but paid ads should not be dismissed by any shout, because around about 20+% will end up in a valuation, and around about, don't know the exact number here, but it's around about 12% of them will actually come to market. Generally speaking, they take longer time to come to market, obviously, than somebody than an organic lead coming into your website. But it's very difficult to know at when to give up on a lead, because you think
Y-
and if you do, in your scenario, because in your case, you deal with so many different leads, you get a feel for it and a flavor for it. But
yeah, absolutely.
you also know that that lead isn't just going to get left, because it drops into an automated nurture that keeps in front of them for 12 months. I suspect if you didn't have that, you'd probably keep them and
Yeah,
try it for longer,
definitely.
wouldn't you?
Yeah, hang on to them longer. And I think that must be the case for most agents, because because if they've got leads coming in all the time, then obviously the newer ones are the priority. So anything that is a little bit older or that you've tried to contact a few times, logically and logistically, you're just going to spend more time on newer leads, and then the older ones, yeah, well, as far as we're concerned at ValPal, they will go into a nurture system, so they're not lost completely.
No.
So they're still being contacted, but it's kind of keeping your eye on the newer ones as well, which is
Yeah,
also obviously important.
and that's why the automation and part of it is so important, because if you have a consistently regular flow of inbound leads, you get swamped very quickly. So you have to be able to let them go at some point, as long as they're going into some form of automation nurture, and then they'll come back to you when they are ready and when they re-engage. Right. These are a final question, and you're not allowed to be rude on this one. If
Would I?
if an agent remembers one thing from this video, what would it be and why?
Persistence. That's it. That's one word. One word.
Yeah.
If anyone has ever seen that film about McDonald's. It's called, oh man, it's gone straight out my head. Michael Keaton, The Founder. I think that's what it is. Yeah, The
Oh yeah,
Founder.
yeah,
Yeah. Persistence, because like in that film, he said it's not necessarily about talent. I mean, obviously that plays a part, but it's about persistence. You've
Mm,
got to like almost not take no for an answer. So yeah, persistent. So yeah, don't just try a lead once and let it go and forget it.
no,
Try
so
it 3 times minimum, and even more if there's time. I realize obviously there's a lot of demands on agents' time, but if there's a time to nurture those leads and actually call them as a person, 3 times plus, then do that, and it will hopefully, you'll be rewarded.
yeah, leads are the heartbeat of your company, of the
Yeah, they
business,
are. Without
and
them, like, how are you going to
without
function?
them,
So
no, exactly right. So treat them as such, I would suggest as well. Well, listen, thank you very much indeed, Lisa. I think
thank
it's been
you.
very informative, and I thank you very much for your
Yeah,
time.
I hope so. Thank you.
No
Thanks.
problem.